Hello, Gary Stearman. Time for another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today in studio with me, author, lecturer, filmmaker L.A. We're going to be discussing his latest video, Watchers-4. You'll enjoy this one. Well, L.A. Marzulli, welcome to Oklahoma City and the studios of Prophecy in the News.
Great to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
It's always good to have you here, and you always bring with you something new and exciting. And this time you've outdone yourself. The video, Watchers-4. And you know, there have been, as the title of this video implies, there have been 3 others prior to it. And before we talk about Watchers-4 today, L.A., I want you to go back to the beginning. What got you started in this series? And by the way, the Watchers series has won widespread acclaim. It's one of the best sellers we've ever offered at Prophecy in the News. What got you started?
Well, I was on the History Channel Ancient Aliens show, and they interviewed me for about 3 hours. And at the end of that interview, you could hear a pin drop in the room because most of these folks in the crew had never heard the information about the Nephilim and the bridge from the Nephilim to the whole UFO phenomena. And the season 1 I was on for about 2 minutes. So basically they edited most of that 3 hours down to about a 2-minute segment. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we're not getting the Christian perspective out on this show, which is what I thought I was there for. And so I teamed up with my good friend and co-producer Richard Shaw, and we started to produce the Watcher series. The first one in the series is UFOs Are Real, Burgeoning and Not Going Away, specifically to get the Christian biblical worldview out about this phenomenon, which is going on globally and has been going on literally for decades now. That's the genesis behind the thing.
Now, there's a word that we're going to be using several times in this program, and that word is Nephilim. Nephilim. You'll hear it pronounced different ways, and we're going to talk about that word. Before we do, I want to read from Genesis 6, and I want to let L.A. comment on this. Genesis 6, for there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. By now, that's a very, very well-known verse, but L.A., parse that, if you will. Tell us exactly what that means and about this mysterious word, Nephilim.
Well, the essence of the text lays in the phrase sons of God. And we know that Scripture is the best interpreter of the Scripture. In other words, where else in the Bible is that term sons of God used? And of course, when we go to Job, we see sons of God is used again. And that word, that phrase is B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God. And that speaks of the angelic host. It doesn't differentiate between fallen and good angels, but it speaks always of the angelic host. There's no way you can get somehow the sons of God mean the godly line of Seth. Otherwise, it would have said that. It says specifically the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now, the daughters of men are the daughters of men. It doesn't say the nasty girls of Cain. It doesn't say that. So it kind of blows the Sethite theory out of the water when we just look at what the text says and we allow the Bible to interpret itself by going in the book of Job. B'nai Ha-Elohim is always angels, refers to an angelic host. And what most people can't wrap their heads around, and I understand it because it's a jump. We're not. Most pulpits, most preachers steer away from this stuff. But it speaks of the unspeakable. And that simply is this, that the fallen angels came to earth, had sexual union with the daughters of men, and because of that unholy act, they created the abomination, the hybrid, known as the Nephilim, half angel, half man.
So, when the King James Bible, which I'm reading here, talks about there were giants in the earth in those days, the word giants is not fallen angels.
Correct.
It is the offspring of the fallen angels, and giants is a translation of this word that we're talking about.
The Nephilim were the product of this unholy union between the fallen angels, the women of earth, created this hybrid known as the Nephilim. And that text also says, and also afterwards, which means, and also afterwards. It means what it says. It says what it means.
And now, here's the interesting thing. There has been so much in the way of of lecture material developed lately, books, videos of various kinds talking about this subject, and yet this subject is still kind of shunned in the greater church. That is, the Christian church as it is known worldwide steers clear of this subject. So you have a kind of a dichotomy here. There's a real interest in the subject on the one hand. People buy a lot of books and so forth.
Sure.
On the other hand, the church seems to ignore it. We're living, I think, in a time of great change.
I certainly concur. You know, Yeshua, Jesus warns us it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns. Why, out of all of the Tanakh, out of all of the Old Testament, because remember, the New Testament wasn't written then, out of all the scripture he can point to, why does he go and point to, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns? What is he trying to signal? What is he trying to tell us? What is he trying to show us? And I firmly believe that he's pointing to what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in history is the presence of the fallen angels having sex with the women. And of course, that begs the question, if it's happening then, is it happening now?
And so what we're talking about in the purest terms here is the study of Bible prophecy. It's my opinion that you always go wrong if you omit the study of Bible prophecy. Sooner or later, the Bible will not make sense to you anymore.
Wholeheartedly.
Because prophecy is interwoven throughout all the scriptures. Some people say a third of the Bible is prophecy. I think the whole thing is prophecy if you take it from Genesis to Revelation. And so let's now talk about the video that you've just completed, Watchers-4. Now, when you did Watchers-4, you did begin with the subject of the Nephilim. Tell us what you discovered as you did this video.
Well, we interviewed Rob Skiba, who you've had on the show before, also Russ Dizdar, Joe Taylor, Judd Burton, Chuck Missler, Doug Hamp, all people who have looked into this scripture.
Yeah.
And we are all in agreement that the Nephilim were on the earth, and they left artifacts. They left traces of themselves. In other words, some of these ancient megalithic structures that we see throughout the world, we believe that is actually Nephilim architecture. What was astounding to me is that we discovered that the Nephilim literally may have been chased out of the Levant of Israel when Joshua and the crew come in and begin to take over the Promised Land. They destroyed many of the giants. Some of them may have escaped and went northward into Europe, through England, and then come down, or actually wind up in what is now the Ohio Valley. The reason for that is there is a set of mound complexes, ancient megalithic structures, which go back at least 3,000 years. They have no idea who built these things. And we hear over and over again that the settlers get this now, that the settlers, when they were beginning to probe these mounds and find out what was in them, they pulled skeletons between 7 feet, which isn't that tall, but some of the larger ones were 12 to 15 feet. 6 fingers, red hair, double rows of teeth, and copper armor. I believe these are not Native Americans. This is something else. And we believe that the Nephilim are actually all through the Americas.
In fact, there's a lot of evidence that the Native Americans acknowledged that there was a prior race of men that they thought of as demigods almost, and they built a lot of their religion around that history, which they had buried deep inside somewhere. So we've got a worldwide manifestation in the ancient days of these people. You know, when Moses and the children of Israel were told by God to go into the Promised Land, can't do it. We're like grasshoppers in their sight.
That's right.
And a lot of people just sort of blow that off and say, well, that's just exaggeration, and there really weren't people that big, and so forth. There's a major cover-up today, I believe, to the effect that, no, all that was mythology. There really were not big people in those days. And in fact, the evidence is just springing up everywhere, isn't it?
Well, when we sat down with Joe Taylor at the Mount Blanco Museum, and it's a very iconic picture. It's all over the internet. It shows Joe, and he's got like an old prospector's hat on, and he's got a long white beard, and he's in kind of old funky clothes, and he's standing next to this femur bone, upper thigh bone, from a giant, which was unearthed in Turkey. It's a cast of what this thing would have looked like. This came from a report by a man who actually saw the bone. and witnessed this. This giant was at least 15 feet tall, and of course Joe is standing by this thing. And we asked him point blank, Joe, not only were they in Turkey, but do you believe also that some of these structures that we see throughout the Americas are attributed to the Nephilim? And he said yes. And that's what's so amazing about getting this collection of men together in Watchers-4, because they all weigh in from their books and their writings and their research that this phenomena was not only in the Promised Land, it was literally global.
Now, here's the fun part about Watchers-4. In your everyday practice, you don't have a chance to do what L.A. does. He gets to travel to these wonderful places, interview these people who have marvelous stories to tell, marvelous evidence to display, and he films it all. He puts it in a form that is quite entertaining. You can sit down and watch Watchers-4 and sort of take that armchair trip with him around the world as he investigates all of these amazing subjects. I want to talk to you next about a city that probably a lot of people have heard of. It's Rockwall, Texas. Okay, Rockwall, Texas. You can probably go there and find a produce stand, buy some pretty good tomatoes, but what else can you find in Rockwall, Texas?
Well, my good friend and co-producer Richard Shaw and I, we were doing interviews, obviously, for Watchers-4, and we wound up in a place called Rockwall, Texas, and we interviewed a man, John Lindsay, who had done an excavation at Rockwall. And this is an ancient megalithic site that goes back thousands of years. He had the stones analyzed, and what he found, to his astonishment and of course ours, is that wherever this rock came from, there's only one other place on earth where we actually see it, and that is in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. It is also on the same parallel, I think it's 33 degrees, as the Great Pyramid is. So this is a sacred site. He excavated parts of the wall, and over the outer surface there's some sort of almost like a mortar type surface over the wall, which acted as a waterproofing. He's got samples of all this. He's got pictures of it. He's an architect, so he drew these amazing hand drawings of what he discovered at the wall. So Richard and I are now in Rockwall. We're excited. We can't wait to see evidence of this, and we go to City Hall. And I asked the clerk, well, where can we find the rock wall? We're here on a film crew. We're here to do a shoot. And the woman just goes, what rock wall? And we go, and she gets someone else, and they come out and they go, well, after 5 or 10 minutes of consulting and maps and all this stuff, well, all the sites now have been covered over.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what we said.
That cover up your tourist sites. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Unbelievable. And what Lindsay was telling us, John Lindsay was telling us, that underneath City Hall itself, there's this large cavern. I mean, it's apparently just humongous. It's huge. And again, there's no access to this. We've been told, Lindsay said that they found a giant skull, not on the Rockwall site, but close to the site, where you could take a human skull and actually insert it into this giant skeleton. So we believe that Rockwall was in fact a Nephilim site at one point, and it's thousands of years old.
And it makes sense. You name a city Rockwall, there must be a rock wall there somewhere.
Absolutely.
And the part that I liked, and you need to see it when you watch Watchers-4, is that you can actually see the evidence that something like a concrete or a plaster was mixed up by the ancients, and you can see the tooling marks.
The trowel marks, right
trowel
in the
marks,
rock,
which is just
fascinating.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, you want to see this and much more that we haven't even had a chance to talk about yet. Just call the 800 number on your screen, 1-800-475-1111, and order Watchers 5. It's L.A.-Marzulli's latest. It's just like the others. You'll love it. It's going to be, pop the big bowl of popcorn and put this in the DVD, and I guarantee you that you'll enjoy yourself. And not only that, you're going to learn a lot that will, I think, take you deeper into places in Scripture that you may not have gone before. Watchers-4, $19.95 plus shipping and handling. But, of course, as we always do, we want to offer LA's other work. And so we're putting together what we're calling the Watchers Collection. It is Watchers-4 plus his previous 3 videos. You have the complete set, the Watchers Collection, for only $79.95, plus this bonus. L.A. Marzulli, the lecture series. This has 2 DVDs in it. This is a total of 5 DVDs for $79.95. That'd be about a $100 value, and it's yours for $79.95 if you call 1-800-475-1111 and ask for the Watchers collection, $79.95 plus shipping and handling. You'll be going on a trip, and what's more, it's going to be a spiritual trip, because L.A. is a Bible-believing, committed Christian who believes in the saving blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. He believes in the study of Bible prophecy. He believes that prophecy is being fulfilled today, and everything he does is done on that basis, right?
Absolutely. That is my worldview, most definitely.
And it comes through. Well, let's go on with Watchers-4. What else would you like to tell us? After Rockwall, where do you go there?
Well, we went to, and we actually sat down with Jonathan Daniels, who is the senior advisor to Danny Dannon, who is the Speaker of the Knesset. It was an amazing interview, and of course we were talking to him about Israel and what is happening in the Jewish state. And one of his remarks, which just astounded me, is when I asked him, I said, "What about the Arab Spring? Did anyone in Israel see the Arab Spring?" And he said, "The Mossad, the IDF, no one saw the Arab Spring coming." And of course, this dovetails to when we sat down in Watchers-4 with Dan Gordon, discussing that Israel has no idea who she's dealing with now on not a 6 months or a 3 months. He said a month-to-month basis. I would shorten that to week-to-week basis at this point, as everything is changing. We see in Egypt now the Muslim Brotherhood taking the reins of power, something that I blogged about over a year ago and predicted that that's what would happen. And of course, it's there right now. Speaking with him, we talked with Daniels about the coming attack on Iran, and he kind of didn't really dodge the question, but he basically said, we have plans and we will deal with Iran. And he made it very clear that Israel knows exactly what they're dealing with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the Iranians' quest for the bomb, despite what they say. So amazing.
Well, let me run something past you, L.A., regarding the Arab Spring. And you had a chance to talk to the man who knows, the senior advisor, after all, Knesset advisor. When I think of the Arab Spring, the thing that surprises me is the way it was lauded in the Western world. Europe and the United States, everybody thought, "Oh, this is great. This is going to bring Middle East peace at long last." And many of us watched that with absolute horror, because to us it looks like anything but peace.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think the Israelis have a view that differs from the view of the West.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a media blackout right now.
Yeah.
Last week in Gaza, 150 missiles came over from Gaza into Israel. Not word one about any of that. And of course, when we get imams that are declaring that Jerusalem will be the capital of the new Arab states of the Middle East, there's no wiggle room here. Absolutely none. And one can only wonder about Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 17 being fulfilled. And we touch on those subjects. We sit down with rabbis and biblical scholars and touch about what we feel is the coming fulfillment of those prophecies.
There are a lot of rabbis in Israel today who are students of Bible prophecy. And, of course, they study on a different basis than Christians do. They go back through the Zohar and the Mishnahs and the Gemara, and they go back and they look at key texts. But a lot of them also investigate the Torah and Torah coding. And we've read a lot about Torah coding. And in this video, L.A. visits with a rabbi, and you talk a little bit about that. And by the way, it's fascinating what comes out.
Rabbi Glazerson is an amazing human being. He's authored 17 books. It may actually be more than that. He's an amazing man. And we were conducting this interview about Torah codes, and we were talking about the Esther code and some other codes which we show in Watchers-4. But at one point I asked him, I said, "Rabbi Glazerson, could there be a link between the ancient ephod, the vestment worn by the high priest with the 12 stones of Israel with the names of the tribes written on, which would light up when the high priest would ask a question to the Most High God?" And that's how the high priest would ascertain what the answer to the question was. And Glazerson just lit up. And he said, "Yes, it is we see the resemblance between the ephod, and that's how he sort of talks.
Yeah.
But and the modern day Torah codes, and we just find that fascinating.
Yeah.
There could be like a link there, because within the Torah codes we see very specific codes or text which refer to events that are happening now. How can that possibly be?
Now, let's go back just a second, because there may be some of our viewers who don't understand the ephod. What in the world was the ephod? And tell us a little bit about that, and how it could connect with Torah codes, which are, by the way, discovered through the study of equidistant letter spacing in the Torah. You see an aleph, and you count so many letters, and you see another letter, and you count so many letters, and another letter, and you begin after a while to see large-scale patterns that intersect each other in amazing ways, and messages begin to come out. Well, the Jews at Hebrew University, and other Jews as well, have been studying this for years, but they've been a little quiet about it. Now I think it's all beginning to come out.
Yeah, it is.
And now tell us about the connection between the ephod and the Torah codes, because this is fascinating.
Well, the ephod, again, that breastplate that the high priest wore, and when the Babylonian captivity came and most of the utensils and implements were destroyed in that first sacking of the temple, if you please, and the temple was destroyed, most of those artifacts are gone, and they're not there. We haven't seen the ephod for thousands of years, literally. And so that way of communication was lost. So this tying into the Torah codes, are the Torah codes a modern way of communicating with God? It should never usurp biblical prophecy and what's written in the Word itself. I understand that. But what we find absolutely extraordinary, for instance, one of the codes, and we had this a year ago when the Arab Spring was happening, and it talked about Mubarak specifically, and it said Mubarak heart attack, which is what happened, and then after that in the same Torah code it said Mubarak is dead. Now he's not dead yet, but he's in a coma
on life support now.
On life support.
And so the 12 stones in the breastplate or the ephod of the high priest would actually illuminate.
Correct.
And they were engraved with letters, and they acted as a kind of a communication device. And that being gone, the Lord still has a communication device for his people. It's a different one, but it works just the same.
That's what we're leaning to, yes.
And by the way, you have to see the video, because this rabbi, you have to see the emotion, the passion as he begins to speak about this. He's a true believer.
Absolutely.
Is very excited about what he sees happening. This video is the thing I like about videos in general. I love books, but a video takes you on an emotional trip. You get to share emotional experiences with other people, and in Watchers-4, you really do that a lot.
Thank you.
You kind of carry the fun, if you will, the excitement, other places, other events, exploring things you might never get a chance to see otherwise, and talking about subjects, by the way. And I want to touch on one now, and then we're going to speak on another program, and I want you to touch on the idea of the near-death experience, because there have been so many books, so much pro and con literature on near-death experiences. Everybody's heard about the tunnel of light, and seeing beautiful things, then coming back to the body and so forth. I think you take the near-death experience discussion to a different level in this video.
We sat down with Jonathan Long, who has written books on this. He's interviewed over 3,000 people who have had an NDE, near-death experience. We also did a very personal one-on-one interview with Howard Storm. Howard Storm's story is absolutely unique. He was an art professor. He was an atheist, an avowed atheist, had no time for God. And he was in a very critical medical situation in France, where he basically lay unattended in a hospital for over 9 hours. And at one point he just finally let go and was outside his body, was yelling at his wife in the chair, who didn't respond. Then he went over to his roommate and yelled in his face and realized that, why can't they hear me? And then he was called from the hallway. Howard, come, we're in a hurry. We've been waiting for you now. Come with us. And so Howard joins this group of people, And at first, there were like, 5 or 6, but as they continued to travel, more and more people joined this little procession. And he realized after some point that, my gosh, we must be out. We've been walking for hours. We must be out of Paris by now. And he was not in a hospital anymore. And it was this dark, gloomy place. And as he progressed with these people, they began to make fun of him and hit him and poke him and scratch him and bite him. And it got to the point where he was just overwhelmed. There were now hundreds of them. And they did they did things to Howard that were absolutely unspeakable.
He found himself in hell, an atheist in hell. And what happens next is phenomenal. We're going to have to wait until our next broadcast. It's all right here on Watchers 4, put together by L.A. Does his usual splendid, sterling job. The editing, the cutting, the motion, the excitement will carry you right through it. I've watched it. I can tell you, it's wonderful. Ask for Watchers 4 when you call 1-800-475-1111. L.A. Marzulli's video, Watchers 4, the DVD, $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Or if you want the entire package, we're also offering with it Watchers 1, 2, and 3. Plus a bonus here that has 2 discs in it, and it's called L.A. Marzulli, the Lecture Series. All 5 DVDs are yours if you just call 1-800-475-1111 and ask for the Watchers Collection. $79.95 plus shipping and handling. That would be about a $100 value if you paid for these DVDs individually. Ask for the Watchers Collection, $79.95 plus shipping and handling, 1-800-475-1111. L.A. Marzulli, you're not finished, are you? You've got your a work ahead of you.
Yeah, we're actually in pre-production for Watchers 5. We've got guests lined up, and should I let this out of the bag now? But we're going to interview Gary Stearman, and we can't wait for that.
Uh-oh.
Our roles will be reversed for once. That should be interesting.
We'll have to talk about that. We're going to continue the story about NDEs at the very beginning of the next Prophecy in the News program, so you'll want to stay tuned for that one, because it has, I think, a moral and ethical message that we all need to hear, right?
I agree, absolutely.
Well, it's going to be fun. I can hardly wait myself. L.A. Marzulli, new video, Watchers 4. And remember, things are happening fast in this world. They are. His trip to Israel proves that. It's right on the DVD. There are things that no man can calculate going on in God's promised land these days. Jesus is coming soon. Gary Stearman, as always, I just want to remind you, keep looking up. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.